Chris, appreciate you jumping on the podcast today.
Brett, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Of course, of course. So, so the viewers and the speakers can get a little background to you. What's your background and journey to your current role with the AHL?
So, Brett, I started my career back in 2004 as an inside sales rep with the Orlando Magic. And back in those days with inside sales, it was a temporary program, a place for young professionals looking for careers in sports ticket sales to get their start. So I spent almost a year working in that program. Beyond that, I had a chance to take more of a senior level sales position with the Boston Bruins and the TD Garden, selling group tickets for both properties. I did that for 2 years and then had an opportunity to oversee that department. And then that brought me to San Diego in a similar capacity, working in group sales out there. And then from there, I moved over into the secondary space and took an interesting opportunity with StubHub, overseeing their corporate sales and hospitality division nationwide. I was with StubHub for just over 2 years before I went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and had a really cool opportunity down in Southwest Florida to start a regional sales and service office as an extension of the Buccaneers home office in Tampa. I was with the Buccaneers for about 4 seasons before I took this role currently as the VP of Team Business Services with the American Hockey League, which has me in my department overseeing league-wide best practices from a business operations perspective. So that's my almost 14-year journey here in about 2 minutes.
That's very cool, and I think that plethora of experiences, we'll get into that as we continue to go. And so the first question towards that is, as you were growing up in sales, who are some of those influences in the various places that you were, and what specifically was it about those styles they had or the successes they had that really stood out to you as something you wanted to emulate?
That's a good question, Brett. The main reason I chose to go to the Orlando Magic out of the NBA Career Fair was my direct manager at the time, Bobby Bridges, was someone that I really took to his sales style and his mentality of really investing in his people. And he recruited a really small inside sales class so that everyone really got that one-on-one and team attention, and really made it about your development. And I really also took to the approach he used with customers over the phone and in person. It really wasn't like he worked for the Orlando Magic. It really was like he was a consultant going in and finding out what was most important to his clients, what their successes were, what their challenges were, and making a really strong recommendation as to how the product that he marketed could best help them accomplish their goals. And he really helped to shape my mentality at a young age, along with the fact that the Magic really invested in, outside sales training. So whether it was Murray Kahn coming in to really help me understand how to sell groups and how to build large scale groups, or it was Charlie Chislagi coming in and telling me or explaining to me the value of getting face to face and, what that means for, a young person's sales career, was invaluable. So, I really couldn't have chosen a better spot to start.
No, that's really cool. And I think, one of the things that you mentioned, specifically about Bobby, and certainly I've got all the respect in the world for what Murray and Charlie have done. As you were talking about, being that consultant going in, talk to a little bit about what's so important about that versus, I think what you and I see a lot when we see a lot of young sales reps is show up, throw up. What is so important about that, that mentality of I'm going to go in and solve their needs? Because, we hear from some reps, listen, that just takes longer. Like it's a longer process. You're elongating everything. So what about that process is so much more valuable given that it probably does take a little bit more time than show up, throw up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the things that, Bobby taught me and that I teach, and throughout my 9 years in management is that, the difference between, the first outreach and the end of the sales process is one thing, and that's the ability to build trust. And I think that the sooner that you can portray to your clients that it's about them and that you hear them and you're listening to them and you're understanding what their needs are and what would be the perfect solution to them for them, only helps you to further build that trust. And then sales just happen naturally, at that point. So when I started really making it all about them, at first, it's obviously somewhat awkward when you're at the outset of your career because you think to yourself, at some point, I should be starting to talk about, my company and my products, and my goal is to sell you, and I have to put up revenue. It's really hard to keep the mindset of continue to build trust and build rapport and figure out what the client's needs are and really trust the process that it's going to happen. And it may not happen as quickly as you want, but you're going to start to develop relationships and get into getting referrals, and you're going to have a richer career from a sales perspective if you approach it that way.
And so describe to me a little bit, because you also mentioned that point about, so I mean, half of that is so important, but I think the other half that's so important is making that strong recommendation, right? I think, no matter how much a rep might be there for someone, they still get a little bit gun shy about making a recommendation specifically, and they could be as diligent as possible and then still get into throw up in the end. So focusing most specifically on the recommendation, part about it, what have you found so valuable about making that one strong recommendation?
I think it's based on taking client through a really effective needs analysis as part of the sales process. I think the most important thing you can do for your client is put them into a product. In our cases, seats or suite or whatever it might be that they're most comfortable with. I've never really had success nor really teach, really starting at the top and trying to put somebody into something that's not a good fit for them or doesn't help them meet their goals. I've always been a true believer in putting them into something that they're most comfortable with and that they're going to get the most value out of. And I think that, what separates, the really good sellers out there from the average ones is being able to make that strong recommendation, support why you're making that recommendation, be ready and able to answer questions or get past hesitations, and then open that relationship. So, the best sellers out there know just when to push, but push in the right way, meaning, we know that this is the right fit for the client. They may have some hesitations, as anybody does, when you're investing in something for the first time. But the really talented ones out there can gain that trust from a client and push them for the right reasons.
Yeah, and I think, what's so important about everything that you just said is, it really does establish you as an expert for the client, and people want to do business, sure, with friends, but they'd rather do business with someone that they believe is the expert at what they're selling, or what that person's buying. And I think as a client, and I've started to see this more and more as I've had to make more life decisions as I get older, but if someone asks you 35 questions and then doesn't give you a solution, isn't that just like a gigantic letdown, right? It's like, what was the entire point of me having this conversation with you if all of a sudden you're just going to give me every single option I can read on the internet anyway?
Absolutely. And as I was managing sales teams, I challenged them to consistently put themselves on the other side of that phone call or the other side of that meeting table to really, put themselves in their client's shoes and saying like, hey, am I presenting this the right way? Because to your point, why pay salespeople um, for something that a client could just go on a website and purchase himself. So a client's not looking to come off of a phone call or come out of a meeting with 3 or 4 options that he or she has to then make a decision on because chances are they may be more confused than when they went into the phone call or went into the meeting. They're looking for you to be the expert and for you to say, if this were my money based on what you've told me is most important to you, here's what I would do and why.
That's awesome. It's so spot on. And so you've successfully sold special events, NHL, Major League Baseball, NBA, secondary market, NFL, and now you're selling AHL teams on your support and your vision. What is it about your sales process that's enabled you to be successful in each of these positions?
I think the biggest thing for me, Brett, is whether it's been any one of the sports at any level or geographically wherever I've gone. I've and product aside, I've tried to implement and teach the same process. And like I said, the products change, but the consultative sales process of starting off with being as creative as you can and understanding that it's about first establishing two-way contact, and that can happen in any variety of ways, especially in 2018. Getting the appointment, and then being really good. Going through an effective line of unselfish questions, developing your needs analysis, making a strong presentation and recommendation, being prepared, as I said before, for questions and, of course, objections, getting through those successfully, and then closing that deal and preparing a great platform for follow up. And as long as I've been able to really abide by those steps, trust those steps, and teach those steps, it hasn't mattered whether it's been, Bruins hockey, Padres baseball, the secondary market, or, the American Hockey League. We've been able to be successful by trusting it.
So three things I want to touch on there. First, I think one of the things that I love about listening to you talk that way is just how defined your process is, because I have my sales process too. Can you speak a little bit about the development of your process and why it's been so important to think about the steps that lead to success and why that's made repetitive success for you, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think that as I developed out the process, and I've had great mentors and great trainers, and I've made tweaks along the way. I think that you know coming up with that process and putting it down on paper was one thing, but really understanding what goes into each step of that process. There's a huge psychological component in really putting yourself in the mind of the buyer through each one of those phases and being able to teach what you need to listen and look for as a sales rep as you're going through each one of those phases with your prospect. So I think that as sales leaders out there, it's really important that we're not only teaching the process, and everyone's process is a little bit different, but we're teaching the whys behind each phase of the sales funnel
Yep.
and what to listen for and what to look for and how to go to the next step and what to be ready for. And
Awesome.
I've always been a big admirer of Peyton Manning, and my sales reps will attest to that. And it wasn't so much for his play on the field, which was obviously fantastic, but it was the preparation that he had not only for him but the players around him, that they were going to be ready for any situation that was presented to them. And that's always what I've tried to prepare my sales teams for, and prepare at this point prepare all of our sales teams across the American Hockey League for, is for all the what ifs.
So good, and I think the word, you use the word wise. One of the buzzwords that I'm in love with when it comes to sales is intent. Like, you every when you lay it out that way and you think about it that way, it just means that every single action that you take has real intent behind it. Just like you talked about everything that Peyton Manning does to prepare, he's not doing things to prepare that won't make an impact on the field on Sunday. So there is intent behind literally every single action that he's taking. And if you take that mentality into sales, there's no doubt how successful you can be. One of the words you used, and I think I know why you used it, but I would love to hear you explain it more, because it may get a couple of people who are listening to this be like, huh? Was you used the word creative. What did you mean by utilizing the word creative at the beginning of your sales process?
I think that one of the biggest things that I've been taught, and one of the things that I teach almost every day, and have done for quite some years, as I've been fortunate to be in leadership roles, is it's about results, not necessarily activity. And we've got to make the phone calls, we've got to make the emails, we've got to send the text messages, we've got to use social tools like LinkedIn. But I never want people to get confused with results versus activity. So as we're trying to think about, our hit list of who we're trying to work with out there from a prospect's perspective, it's thinking about what are we doing to ultimately get face to face with that prospect. What are we doing that the other 99 people that day or that week aren't doing or aren't willing to do? Are we going to events where they might be a part of? Are we sponsoring something that they're passionate about? Are we inviting them to something that's relevant to them? As opposed to just going through the motions and making phone calls and leaving voicemails. We want to do things that are results driven and that are going to drive the sales process forward.
It's such a good point. I think, one of the things that, as I've taken a look at, what differentiates, the top salespeople from the middle of the pack to the bottom salespeople, I think the people at the top, they're always like, what do I need to do to earn that client's business? What do I need to do to earn that client's business? And the attitude as you fall down the sales chart a lot of times is, well, I'm a professional sports team. You should buy from me. And I think that attitude change, the attitude of what do I need to do to get that sale across the line? How do I earn their business? And using the creativity to push it over the line is such an underrated part of sales that just the best sales and most natural salespeople seem to get instinctually.
I couldn't agree more, Brett. As a salesperson and as sales leaders, if we're not constantly being humble and being humbled with the fact that clients want to do business with us, and if we're not looking at everything out there as a competitor to us, whether that's another sports team, or it's golfing, or it's going out to eat, or it's going to a movie, anything where clients have the option of spending their entertainment dollar, that's a competitor to us. And we need to be, and that's where, coming up with, unselfish questions and an effective needs analysis and a presentation is so important to show clients that, you're going to be, your business is valued with us. We want to take care of you. We want to take care of your employees. We want to take care of your best clients.
That's so important. So the last one that I think you made reference to, and you made reference to it again just there. Can you describe to the audience what an unselfish question is? Because I think that's such an important turn of phrase on it.
I think that there's a few that I always go to. The first one, is very elementary, but I always like to ask it anyways. Is hypothetically, Brett, if we were to, move forward with something here with our organization, what would be most important to you, or what would be most important that you would want for your clients?
Yep.
And I think that when you're starting off, your questioning with something like that, it's letting your prospect know that you're coming at this from a very unselfish angle, and
Yep.
that you're looking to make sure that his or her needs are met, and that when he or she has good clients at your venue, that it's important to you that they're being taken care of.
That's awesome. And setting that level of thought and expectation up front will only make it more and more successful. When it comes time to actually execute on it, which is awesome. And
And I
so,
and I also think too, it's also as you're going through your line of questioning, finding out, it's really important to find out what's been most successful in the past for them, why it's been most successful, and what may not have worked in the past,
absolutely.
and why they feel that was going to be the case. And I'm a very big believer in asking the why behind things as we're in this information gathering stage of the process.
Yeah, I mean, listen, one of my biggest clients when I was in Columbus was someone who first conversation told me, "I'm not doing business with you because you screwed up a sponsorship with us." And so, I mean, as long as you take the client first approach, that situation reminded me that you can pretty much get through anything at that point. And so you, in your current role, you've got access and have had access in your previous roles to managing reps across all the different platforms that you and I both talked about. What are some of the skills that you've seen in the top sales reps that have made you say, "Man, I wish I thought of that," or "Man, I wish I did that"? When I was really a salesperson full time.
The biggest thing for me, Brett, that I didn't do as a young sales rep, was really go out and seek, and I like to use the word crave objections and hesitations. I was guilty of coming back from many appointments thinking that it was a really good appointment and the client liked everything they heard, but that client wasn't doing business with me. And, it wasn't until I was several years into my career where I really learned the value of seeking out objections, how to use trial closes, putting clients in hypothetical situations in order to really get true objections and find out what was really important out of them. And to answer your question, the best reps out there, the people that are really the ones coming home with a signed contract, are the ones that are finding what's most important to their clients. But more importantly than that, they're figuring out what a client's objections are, what are their most important hotbed questions, what are the hesitations that they have, and the best of the best are navigating around them and getting them to an area of comfort where the client's willing and excited to move forward.
So I mean it's such a good point because I think that was a huge problem I also had when we started in sales, especially when I was at CEB. I'd successfully get through my sales pitch, which they taught us at CEB, and then I'd be like, "Yes, they loved it." It was like, oh, I completed my sales pitch, and they didn't yell at me, so they must be interested. What is it about craving objections that gets you more sales? Because I think I want to make sure that we draw that line to the reps that are listening to this about this is why it's so valuable.
Because if you're putting yourself again in your client's shoes, and you're talking about any first time investment you've ever made, like you've thought about it again, there's a reason that you haven't already moved forward with that, and that's because there's something in your mind or in another decision maker's mind that's helping you with this decision, that's just not right. Whether or not it's the price seems a little bit too high or out of your budget, or it's a timing commitment, whatever it might be, there's something that's not getting you to sign on the dotted line right then and there. And more often than not, it's because there's an objection that we haven't asked for, or there's an objection that they haven't told us yet. And there's a difference behind that. And, when I'm teaching people how to successfully navigate through objections, I'm highly encouraging them to not only, ask, what sorts of questions or hesitations do you have that would prevent you from moving forward with that today. I'm also encouraging them to follow up with, okay, is there anything else? What else are we missing? What else might cause you to hesitate? And if this truly is a great fit for your client and you truly have satisfied all of his or her objections or hesitations, then there should be no reason that right then and there you're not walking out with some kind of an agreement.
No, that's awesome. And I think one of the things that you want to tell a rep too is trust your instincts, right? Like if you feel like someone's is thinking about it, but there's something holding them back, don't avoid it, right? Like if you feel that kind of itch that they are holding back, like trust that instinct that you've had from your previous phone calls and everything else. And I say call them out on it, obviously land the plane a little softer than that expression, but don't be afraid to say, hey, listen, I work with people all the time who, when they say yes, are ready to jump in with both feet. You seem a little bit hesitant to me. I want to make sure I'm helping you out. What's holding you back?
That's a perfectly said, Brett. It's also why it's so important to get face to face to be able to look at your client's body language and mannerisms, and to really, like you said, trust your instincts, and really let them know that it's okay that they have hesitations and they have questions, because if they don't have hesitations or they don't have questions, then more often than not, their interest level isn't high enough
Yep.
to move forward. No one's going to, in my experience, like every single thing about your product or your venue. There's going to be something, and the best of the best out there know that that's okay, and to let their clients know that that's okay.
Absolutely. And so, turning the page a little bit on this one, I think part of the ability to maintain your success as a salesperson, despite moving quite a bit, I've had to learn this, is creating a positive work-life balance. And, especially now that you've been up the game with traveling, what do you make sure that you do kind of off the pitch or off the field, as they say in sports, to make sure that you really are ready to go when the buzzer sounds?
I think first and foremost, and obviously this job here with the AHL calls for a lot of travel, and I like that because it means that we're able to get out there and make an impact with our teams. Um, First and foremost, I think it comes with having a good, solid team of coworkers here that you can trust to help you with your workload, that you can trust to delegate a portion of your workload, and know that the jobs and the tasks are going to be done, and your expectations are going to be met. So I think every place I've gone, I've tried to surround myself with really good people that I could trust. Beyond that, and I've really tried to abide by the policy of when I'm not at work, I'm not at work, and I'm fully engaged with my friends or my family. And although it be work is always on your mind to some degree, I'm really trying to engage and listen to them just as intently as I would be with my coworkers here or with any number of our teams that are out there. So I think it always helps when you have coworkers that you can trust and that you enjoy working with. But I think more importantly, it's you got to take some time to recharge, to get your head straight, especially when you're in the sales game, because it can be a real grind.
So, we in sports, and you and I know this better than as well as just about anybody in the business. moving around, moving into different markets. But we all know it's important to really make a connection to that market to really be a successful salesperson. So, talking right now to those reps that are about to make their first move or are making their second, third, 12th move in the sports industry, what advice would you give to people to make themselves really a part of the community that they're moving into?
Well, I think backing up just one step, I think, making sure that as you're making moves, strategically, I've told people to make sure that you're joining the right group, that you're going to work for the right leader and the right leadership group, that you're putting your career in their hands. So, making sure that you've got a really high level of comfort with who's going to be your next boss and your next leadership group. Beyond that, it's critical in our business to ingrain yourself in the community, to get introduced to the who I call the influencers in your community, the people that are doing the best nonprofit work, the people that are heading up the most successful businesses, the chambers of commerce, people that are doing great things in the community. Because to get back to what we were talking about earlier, it's all about trust. And when you show that you're willing to be a part of that community and you're willing to sacrifice for that community and be ingrained in that community, when it wasn't your hometown or even your last town, is going to go a long way to opening up doors that you never knew could be opened by forming those relationships.
That's so
So it's really important because it's people talk.
yeah. And listen, I mean, I even tell reps too, right? Like, listen, don't join a softball league with your fellow reps. Just tell them that you don't know anyone in this town and that you need to jump on with a different group. If you were a high school player or if you're a baseball player or a softball player, putting yourself in positions where you're meeting new people. If you're going to go to a networking event, don't spend 1 minute talking to your counterparts. I think those things are so important because yeah, I see in some of the reps that you have the highest hopes for that don't quite make it. A lot of times it's because they become so over reliant on the friends that they make in the office that it becomes very difficult for them to really invest in the community they're going into.
I talk, one of the analogies that I use with my sales teams is, when you're a rep, like, act as though you're running for president and you're going door to door trying to tell people who you are, tell people what you stand for, and earn their trust and gain their vote. And when you're out at a chamber meeting, to your point, making sure that you're shaking everybody's hands, introducing yourself, and letting them know how you can help them. Seeking out opportunities to speak in front of groups of people to talk about who you are, what your background is, what you do, and how what you do can help them accomplish a personal or professional goal. We used to say when you go out places and you go out to the grocery store, wear your team branded
Love it.
t-shirt and start conversations with people because you never know where that can lead.
It's no doubt. I remember, the community that I think, I did the best job of doing that with was when I was with the crew. And, just by investing, walking around, talking to people, I found out that like four of my neighbors were season ticket holders, right? And, doing little things like that and really, putting in that time in that community, to your point, and wearing that stuff and just doing little things to do it is, it ends up paying huge, huge dividends because all you really need is one of those to come through on a big level. And, it's made every time investment worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that, especially in the sports and entertainment business, being in sales it's a lifestyle, even more so than a career or job. You truly do get out of it what you put into it.
Yes, there's no doubt. So closing this up, it's my favorite last question because I think it's so important sometimes that we see and young people see, what's under the hood, of some of the most successful people. in the business. So, Chris, what drives you?
Yeah, I've got to go all the way back again and mention Bobby Bridges with the Orlando Magic. I wasn't more than 2 weeks into my career there, and the investment level that he put into me and the rest of our team there um, showed me at a really, really early age and a really early start to my career that I wanted to, give back to people in the way that he gave back to me and my team there. So that's what initially drove me to wanting to become a manager so that I could train, develop, coach, and help other people accomplish their next goal. And it's always something that I took a lot of pride in. And, one of the big reasons I came to the American Hockey League was yeah, I wanted to be able to, whether that's in person, over the phone, at conferences, be able to make an impact, with young sellers and young managers and really help them define what their goals were and help them get one step closer to what was going to be their next great opportunity. And that's on a professional level. And what truly drives me now on a personal level is my 1 year old son, and making sure that I'm doing all the right things to provide him with a really good life, and I'm being as good of a father as I can be to him. So he's someone that I always look forward to, and he's certainly my why behind all of this.
That's That's awesome. And I think, one of the things that nobody should ever mistake, because I think you and I have talked about this, off of a podcast, is, you know, you know, being able to serve other people and help other people doesn't make you a weak salesperson. That drive to get to the manager job, the director job, senior director, vice president, the ability for me to then go out and do training and now empowerment of a salesperson, like that's enough of a driver, right? To make you want to be really successful in sales.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for people to know is that everyone's got their own drivers and their own whys behind thing, and it's okay if sales isn't for you, and it's okay if you want a career and you just want to be in sales, and management might not necessarily be the route you want to go. It goes back to what you're trying to get with your clients and what's most important to you. And like I said, I was fortunate enough to be exposed to some really good mentors at an early stage in my career, and something I'm fortunate and grateful for. And it's given me my why.
No, that's awesome. Well, listen, Chris, a ton of awesome stuff for the reps and the people listening to take out. I genuinely appreciate the time and look forward to catching up in the future.
Absolutely, Brett. Same here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course.